So on this particular film, you're a producer instead of an executive producer.
Yeah.
Could you explain what the difference was for you as also the writer?
Well, you know, it's strange. As a writer-producer is kind of a weird, precarious job because as a producer, you're supposed to be like the enemy of the writer. So I was at war with myself every single day. But, you know, producer credit just means you have, you know, more input into the actual making of the movie. And it's, you know, I wasn't wearing a business suit or, you know, ordering people around or anything like that.
When it comes to the script, though, the changes that you might make on set, was that significantly different for you as a producer versus a writer or a writer-exec?
I have to be honest, like, I know the right answer is like, yes, it was very different. It was a completely different process, and this is like a whole new world of filmmaking for me, but no. Like, I didn't really feel like I was acting in a different capacity than I did on any other movies.
Why don't we talk about the film a little bit? What inspired you to write this particular one?
Well, I knew I didn't want to write another movie about teenagers, and I inadvertently wound up doing it anyway. Because as I was thinking to myself, all right, I would like to write a dramatic film about an adult, a tortured adult. And then I thought, well, you know what a really great example of a tortured adult would be? Somebody who writes about teenagers, has a drinking problem, has really unhealthy eating habits, and is kind of crazy. And then I was like, oh, I'm writing about myself. And then, you know, but then obviously Mavis is, you know, she's on an entirely different level of, you know, craziness. So the characters began to evolve, and I began to kind of imagine predicaments that she could create and scenes that she could be involved in, and the screenplay just kind of started to build. It was almost like a knitting project. It took a while.
What were the directions that you might have gone in that you were thinking, this would be great, and then you wound up abandoning? Was there anything that changed significantly while you were?
Yeah, I mean, if I can think about certain changes, I know that I toyed with the idea of having Buddy be involved in the attack on Matt, and the more I thought about that, the more I realized, like, that is something that I think people maybe some people were expecting that, and I try not to do anything that's too expected, and also I think Buddy is just like a genuinely decent, clueless guy, and I couldn't see him participating in something like that even as a teenager. So that was, I guess that's one major thing that was on the page that didn't make it to the film.
And how about actually what you shot? Was there anything there specifically that you guys shot and then you realized in editing it shouldn't have been in there?
This is strange, but there was a scene at the end of the movie where she reunites with her dog, who she's been pretty much neglecting the entire film, and she hugs the dog and gives the dog this heartfelt apology. Because I thought to myself, it'd be funny if she's incapable of apologizing to the real people in her life, but can apologize to the dog. And then I realized, and Jason realized, I think as well, that we didn't even want her to apologize to the dog. So that was gone.
What was the process of working with Jason?
I mean, I've worked with him before, so we've always had a certain shorthand together, and it was even more like that this time around. It's nice not having to constantly explain yourself to someone. I love working with Jason, and I don't think there's any other writer in this entire industry, in all of Hollywood, who's had the experiences I have working with a director, because most directors are very, you know, I'm not saying they're not wonderful people, but they're very possessive of the material, and Jason is not like that. Every day he wants to share, and that's an amazing thing for a writer to experience.
How long did you guys shoot for?
It was a 30-day shoot. This was a really similar budget to Juno, similar amount of time. It's actually really fun making movies that are this size, because you can take so many risks creatively that you can't do with, like, Transformers: Dark of the Moon, you know. So this is where I'm comfortable, this size of movie.
What was the process of getting this greenlit?
It was difficult, because, you know, I wrote the script on spec, which, you know, means I wrote it by myself. I wasn't hired to write it. It was just an original idea that I had. I wrote it by myself, you know, not knowing if anything would ever happen to it. And when I took it out to try and sell it, it's challenging, because people, you know, there is this hard and fast rule in Hollywood that a female protagonist has to be likable and sympathetic. That people don't want to hang out with, you know, for 90 minutes in the dark with a woman that's kind of scary. And so I was a little worried, and particularly the ending, I think, is pretty challenging. There was definitely pressure to have a more traditional redemption arc, and to have her learn her lesson at the end, or to have her, you know, see that Matt was the right guy for her all along, and that beauty is on the inside. The typical lessons that were kind of force-fed by Hollywood over and over again. I don't feel that real people in real life change like that so quickly. And it was really important to me that that ending remain intact. And it never would have, I never would have had an opportunity to make this movie if Jason Reitman had not read it and said, you know what, I'm going to drop this other project I'm working on, I'm going to direct this movie, and I'm going to insist that they don't change anything, because he has the clout to do that. When Jason first read this, he said to me, do you know who absolutely has to play this character? It's Charlize Theron. And I have to confess, I don't think about actors when I write. I have this superstition where I feel like you need to, when you're writing, you need to be in a space where you're completely cut off from the business end of things and just trying to tell the story. So I had finished, and of course, like I had thought a little bit, like, okay, who could play Mavis? I honestly had not thought of her, which is crazy because she's perfect. And Jason had, he went to her right away, and he said specifically to the producers and the studio that she was his only choice and the only person he would make the movie with. And luckily, she agreed, and she was also really adamant about keeping the script intact, which is amazing. And her and Jason, I think, I've never seen like an actor-director combination where there was more of a connection. Like they're really amazing together, and it was amazing to watch. And like I said, I can't picture anybody else playing this part. Patton Oswalt, I'd worked with him before actually quite a bit because he was like a semi-regular on the United States of Terror. So I knew him pretty well, and I knew he was a great actor and capable of doing dramatic stuff. Jason, I think, only knew him socially or knew him through his comedy, which, you know, he's very well known as an incredible comedian, but I hope is now going to become very well known as an amazing actor, because he is. And Jason called me one day. He said, hey, do you know Patton Oswalt? And I was like, well, Jason, you just proved that you've never watched an episode of my show, which is what I've suspected all along. And I was right. So yes, I was like, in fact, I do know him. And if you're talking about Matt, I think that's a really inspired idea. So, yeah, another example of somebody who's sort of seems born to play the part. It took me a while actually it took me longer to write this one than usual. I mean, the first draft I wrote in a few months, but we did many, many subsequent drafts. Then when Jason came on to direct, he did a draft with me. You know, he gave me some notes, and I did a director's draft, which is typical. And so it's funny when I think about the very first draft, which it really did evolve a lot. Like initially, I think Mavis was honestly not as Mavis-y, I don't know how else to describe it, than she is now. She actually became an even more intense, aggressive character with each draft, which was something I was initially afraid of, but I was encouraged to keep going. And the whole idea of her being a young adult novelist was really just mentioned once or twice in the first draft, and then eventually, it became such a significant theme that the title of the movie became Young Adult. So that's the kind of thing that changed. The whole experience of United States of Terror was incredibly educational and gratifying, but it was also really chaotic. And at the end of the third season, we didn't know that we were going to get canned. And at the same time, like, I think we sensed it, because you can kind of tell that by the final episode that things tie up kind of neatly. So it was just, there was a regime change over at Showtime, and I think that feeling was kind of in the air. I have to say, like, every single, both times that show was actually renewed for another season, I was in total shock, because, we never had a huge audience, and we were making really sort of strange, provocative television about a woman with multiple personalities. And the fact that we even got to do those 3 seasons is, to me, still pretty stunning. So I guess I can thank Steven Spielberg for that, because, they wouldn't have just kept it on with old Cody. He was asking about directing, which I'm going to do really soon, like within the next couple of months. And I wrote this script this year, obviously after we filmed Young Adult, and it's a really, the material is really strange, I'm going to be honest. It's about this young woman who's grown up in this really sheltered, rural, fundamentalist community, and she gets in this freak accident and decides to leave everything she's known and explore the secular world by going to Las Vegas. And it's another example of something where, you know, when you take this kind of material out on the town, people don't say, oh my God, we're going to give you $60 million, go have fun, you know. It's like people are very reluctant to make that kind of movie, especially right now. I'm working with Mandate again, who are the same people that made Young Adult and Juno, and I know them very well, and they believe in me, so I'm just in the process of making a lot of decisions right now, and it's exciting. When I wrote it, I originally intended to go out to other directors again, like I always do, and for some reason this time I thought to myself, like, you know, I'm going to try it.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing process. When you're creating your scripts, when you're sitting down to do them, what are you initially sitting down and thinking in terms of what you want to write?
You know, I write a lot. Like, I'm all about volume, because you never know if something is going to work. So I figure if you have this one passion project that you've invested everything into and it doesn't work, you're going to be suicidal. So instead, I'm always working on lots of different things. I have a lot of scripts that never see the light of day, that go into desk drawers, that get dragged to the trash, you know, that 2 people read and I decide they're not good enough. I'm always working on a lot. So it's not like I sit down and say, okay, this is incredibly intimidating, this is going to be my next movie. Or you know, nothing. It's always like, this is the scene I feel like writing today, let's see where it goes.
You tend to write with a female protagonist. Is your new film going to be also?
Yes, it's in the next movie. The protagonist is female again. I wouldn't mind writing about a guy. I don't know if I could do it that accurately. I'm impressed by women that can. I would like to write another book. I want to actually write a young adult book now, which is like, because I've met a lot of young adult writers in the wake of making this movie, because they're all coming out of the woodwork to talk about it, which is really cool. And I wrote this other screenplay called Sweet Valley High that's about, like, you know, based on this huge young adult book franchise. So I thought about doing that, but I heard they sell pretty well. That's like, if I could write something like Twilight, that could be good for me. Man, you know, Hollywood is driven by one thing, and that's money. So the fact that Bridesmaids and Bad Teacher did really well means that there are going to be more female-driven comedies, which is wonderful. But it's that simple, and the unfortunate thing is, let's say Bridesmaids had not done well, you wouldn't be seeing any. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works. I'm so happy to be answering, because a couple people have asked me this question, and I'm so happy to be answering it, because I'm glad that we're suddenly in this, there's this thing happening where people are interested in flawed female characters, because that's what I want to write. So I feel like this is a really good time, and I know all my friends who specialize in those kind of scripts are pretty psyched right now, because, you know, we're actually able to some people had, like, you know, female comedy scripts that have been sitting around for years, and now they're finally able to sell them, thanks to Kristen Wiig. So.
What was your favorite day on the film, when you were just having an absolute blast?
I was lucky enough to be here the day that we shot Charlize having the meltdown at the baby naming ceremony. And so, like I said, I didn't spend a lot of time on set, but that's something pretty amazing to see. And, you know, what's amazing about Jason is, like, you know, he did that. I think that he pulled off that scene or that particular exchange in just like 2 takes. And he knows when something works right away. But then Charlize would joke that he would do like 15 takes of her opening a door. But it's like he knows when he has it. And that, as an aspiring director, I'd like to be there for moments like that, because it's the best film school you can imagine.
Well, that was my next question, is as an aspiring director, what have you learned from watching your other scripts being made from other directors that you intend on using as a director in this new one?
I mean, I've never been to film school, and there's nothing better than being on set with, you know, with Jason or with Karan Kusama or with any number of the directors we had on Terra, because we had many. And being able to sit there and watch and say, okay, this is how it works, this is what to do, this is what not to do, this is how to talk to people. You know, this is, you need to make decisions at this pace. For me, it's just, I don't know how else I would go into it. I feel like I had to have that apprenticeship in order to feel, because it's weird. Like, Juno was super successful, and I was offered the opportunity to direct at that time, right after that movie came out, and I turned it down because I didn't know anything, and I'm glad that I waited.
Diablo Cody, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.